Hi, I'm Nyawis. For those who may be wondering, I've changed my username from Shiroi to Nyawis, and contrary to popular belief, it's not actually pronounced Nyawis. Anyways, it's time to go over a project I've been studying for quite a long time and can finally make a video on. Pitshots. Pitshots are when you hit a pilot in their cockpit right before they can eject. The information I'm going to provide comes from my experience and research, so if there are any flaws or new discoveries, be sure to check for a pinned comment. First, let's talk about the basics. This can be done with any pilot weapon and any mech, but the ideal situations vary based on what you're using. Generally, when you demech somebody, their pilot will appear after a second has passed, and start ejecting after about a third of a second. With bots, their pilot will appear instantly, but will be immune until a second has passed. From my experience, I've never really ran into immunity against a player, so there's a chance that the immunity lasts for only a few milliseconds. In other words, the immunity is virtually non-existent for players. Bots, however, do not follow this rule, because bots are superior in every way. Let's talk about the smoke trail. When you destroy a mech, they will leave behind a trail of smoke. This is your first indicator of where a player will appear, and it is essential to hitting pit shots. The reason it is essential is because the first cloud that is emitted tells you a lot of information. Generally, a player's pilot will appear in the first cloud, or at least very close to it. Bots, on the other hand, have told me I don't want to follow this rule because I'm cooler than your average player. Bots will consistently appear at the end of the smoke trail, and so that's why it's not good to practice on them, as players behave differently. To keep it simple, the first smoke cloud roughly indicates when the server has determined the player was demeched. If a mech, such as Hurricane, has boosted right when you demech them, instead of aiming where their destroyed mech is, aim near the first smoke cloud. This is where things start to get complicated, but it's not as hard as it sounds. A player's pilot should never appear past the second smoke cloud. I personally have never ran into this. If anything, they will sometimes appear in the second smoke cloud, but that's only in extreme situations. Here you can see a pilot almost getting past the second cloud, but they don't, so I'm pretty confident in saying that. Speaking of the second smoke cloud, a pilot will appear between the range of the first cloud and the second. The chart that I put on screen shows that you can compare the distance between cloud 1 and 2, and using that distance to then calculate the general radius of where a pilot can appear. The first smoke cloud and the second tell you how much a pilot will shift from the first cloud. If a mech has a fast dash like Dreadwolf or Michael, generally a pilot will appear behind the first cloud. If a mech has a slower dash, there's a chance it'll appear behind the cloud or in it. You can kind of get a feel for this based on how close each cloud in the trail is. If a trail is really compact, then the pilot usually appears inside or just ever so slightly above it. If you demech somebody who is standing completely still or isn't moving much at all, you can shoot the center of the destroyed mech after about a second. Let's talk about common scenarios. Ideally, when you demech somebody, it's when they're not moving too quickly. For example, let's say you're fighting a snow mirage. Snow mirage is very slow when scoped in. If you demech them, their pilot will almost always be in the center of the destroyed mech, but sometimes they will shift based on how they were moving. If the snow mirage was moving to the right while scoped in, their pilot might appear just slightly to the left of the center. Now let's say you're fighting Aurora. If an Aurora starts flying and goes for a beam, that's the perfect setup for a pit shot. If you demech them while they're stationary, they'll appear right in the center of the destroyed Aurora, regardless of if they're in the air or not. If their mech is falling and you demech them, they will appear above the first cloud in their smoke trail. Let's talk about air pit shots a little more. If a mech is descending and you demech them, the pilot will almost always appear above and behind the first smoke cloud. If a mech is ascending and you demech them, the pilot will almost always appear above and in front of the first smoke cloud. In both of these cases, the pilot will follow the trajectory, with the latter situation having them somewhere in between the first and second cloud. You can also always tell if a mech has jumped before you demech them by using the smoke trail, even when it looked like they were stationary. Generally, if a smoke trail goes up, then depending on the trajectory, the pilot will appear between both the smoke clouds, or directly above the first smoke cloud. Another quick note is, after you demech someone, about a third of their ejection height will occur above the pit shot point, then they will teleport above their destroyed mech to finish the rest of the ejection. This doesn't always happen, but it will happen if they're too far from their mech. Let's talk about practicing pit shots. The best way to practice pit shots is in team deathmatch. If you aren't good with the timing and want a laid back environment, practicing pit shots on bots is easier. You cannot use bots for practicing pit shots consistently, as they appear at the end of the smoke trail as I mentioned before, and if they're not close to the ground, they will constantly teleport to their demech position. On PC with bots, I recommend practicing timing using Pulsar, as you don't have to aim directly at the pilot to get an AoE hit or a direct hit. Alternatively, you can use Raven for the large AoE. On mobile with bots, I recommend practicing timing using Raven, as the AoE is really large, especially with the explosive arrow module. Keep in mind when practicing with bots, your objective is just to get used to hitting the bot to understand the timing, as players and bots only have the same pit shot timing, but not the same position. When practicing pit shots in TDM, try to understand why you missed, while keeping the information from this video in mind. You will miss a lot, as this is a very high skill ceiling technique, but once you get it down, it's very satisfying and consistent. With all that being said, that will conclude my video on pit shots. I don't know if you have a different term for pit shots, but I will always call them a pit shot as it's descriptive and simple. This video could be controversial as it might shift the way people play, but I feel like I should share this knowledge, and if it gets patched, then it gets patched. Thanks for watching, and if you found this video helpful, feel free to share it and let me know what you thought in the comments. Bye!